Good morning. Welcome to the Alpine Church of Spiritual Living this morning. I am going to be reading the thought for the week, and if you're in the room, you can join me down at the bottom. If you are watching this on YouTube or whatever way that you can see this after the fact, know that we are here every Sunday in Alpine, California to serve, to give to our community, and for all of you that are out there in the airwaves, that we are here to support and give service to you as well. So if we have something that fills your heart, gives you some sort of benefit, we would appreciate it if you would click on the donate button on our website, Alpine Church of Spiritual Living, and let us have some of your gifts of monetary value to show that we are supporting you. So let me go ahead and start. This is our topic this morning is surrender. Surrender is an interesting notion. Most of the time we picture raising a white flag in front of the enemy. We are giving up, recognizing we are defeated, and hope the enemy will take pity on us and let us live. Well, that's not exactly the type of surrender we're talking about. This is a surrender of our ego. This is a surrender of letting go of the life our ego thinks we should have. The ego tries to protect us by keeping us small, by telling us we have a right to feel self-pity or anger or fear. The ego is very narcissistic and childish in a way. It wants what it wants when it wants it. As a singer, I usually have a song or two that come to mind when I think about a particular subject. Rita Harrington wrote and sang the song, "I Surrender to the Power and Presence of God Within Me." The other song is from the movie Frozen, "Let It Go, Let It Go." I have sung these songs repeatedly over the years when my monkey mind starts nagging me with its what-ifs and if-only scenarios. By living in the present, we eliminate the what-ifs and the future and the if-onlys from the past. Life is happening in the now moment. And yes, there are times in our lives when there is a crisis happening right before our eyes. I'm sure you've experienced at least one or two of these in your life. Do you remember what you did? Chances are you went into appropriate right action, handling it as best you could, and then afterward you fall apart. When I'm driving and I see a potential collision around me, I automatically say Jesus out loud. And you know what? I think that helps diffuse the situation by invoking his name. According to David R. Hawkins, another good crisis prayer is, "Please be with me and show me how to surrender and handle this experience," unquote. Once you discover you're not alone, that the presence of God is a source of help, that fearfulness disappears because you begin depending on God instead of your ego. Say with me, "I am ready to surrender to the power and presence of God within me. I let go, living in the moment, and know all is well, and it is so." So whether we want to admit it or not, our egos are a very strong element of our life. And to set them aside and not pay attention to all the things that this ego talks to us about, is a challenge. And so I'm not asking for each of us this day to just give it up and just let the ego totally go, because it's so ingrained in us, you know? It's something that you just can't do overnight. But what I am asking, if you would make this intention, at any rate, to be aware of when the ego is talking to you, when the ego is coming up, when it's trying to drive you to do this, that, or the other thing, to be aware of its voice and to know that you don't necessarily need to follow it. We have been reading the wisdom of David R. Hawkins this month, and one of the things that he points out, which is the chapter I'm going over today, is surrender. He said, "Caution is different from fear. Caution has a rationality about it. We're not talking about eliminating normal self-preservation. We're just talking about irrational fears. But we're talking about our fears that have no basis in reality." And that's what happens when we go into this this mode of our what ifs and if onlys. That's our ego talking to us. Now, he talks about the fact that if you're walking down the street in New York City, you need to be cautious, you need to be aware, you need to be knowledgeable of what your surroundings are to be safe. And that's not the same thing as being fearful or frightened. Most of the time when we find ourselves in fear, it's about something that's not really happening at the moment. It's something that we conjecture in our own minds. Life is about living it at every single moment. And I love the analogy that Hawkins writes about when he uses music. When you hear a musical note, the note rises and then it falls. As you hear the note, it has already crested and is already falling. Surrender, then, is the willingness to let go of all positionalities of everything, that it arises as it arises, not to label it anything, not to call it anything, not to take a position about it. The willingness to surrender everything as it arises. And I think about that many times. You know, how many of you are into music, or have you ever played an instrument or sung songs, something like that, used your voice as an instrument? Well, if you make a mistake, if you're playing the piano and you hit a wrong note, what do? You keep going. Now, if you're practicing, you might stop and you might, oh, wait, I messed that up. I'll try it again and I'll practice it so that practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect. But if you're performing, if you're giving a performance and you make a mistake, you just go on to the next note because that's what is next. You don't sit there and start, oh dear, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. Because life is moving. I'm trying to, hopefully you're seeing the analogy here of the music coming up and going away, coming up and going away. And that's what every single moment of life is for us. Life is not a rehearsal. It's the real thing. And so when we recognize that this beautiful power is within us, this ultimate divine power brought us here to live its life, then we can know that we're never detached. We're never apart from our source. And so whatever is happening, that source, that power, that presence is there, right there with us when we are open to it. At one point, Hawkins says, by constant surrender to God, all things resolve themselves. I was having a lunch with a friend that I hadn't seen in quite a while, and she was talking about her work. She works for a huge company, and they had released her at one point a few years ago, and now she's back as a contractor with them. And she said, I've changed my whole outlook, my whole attitude about my work, because before I cared too much. I saw what was going on, and I could see that they just didn't have it together, and I wanted it to be right. And she said, now I have this little sticky that I put on my computer. Every morning when I go to work, I sit down at my computer and look, and it says, I will do my best today. I will learn today. And she said, then at the end of the day, I have another sticky that I read to myself, and I said, I did my best today, and I leave it at that. Because she couldn't leave, her work situation when 5 o'clock or whatever the time that her day ended work-wise. She kept going with it in her head. And she said, I've learned that I have to just let it go. How many times do we find ourselves in that sort of a situation, whatever it is, that it just keeps mulling over, and there's nothing you can do about it then anyway? She says, I don't have the authority to make the changes or to do the things that I think should be done, so I'm not going to worry about it. One of the things that really, really helps me, and I hope and pray that all of you have this experience in your life. If you ask and you are open and you are willing, I believe that each and every one of us will have this experience of being the observer, of being the witness to what is going on in our life out here. I would suggest the first thing you do to prepare yourself for being the witness and being the observer is to recognize that, and say it right here, first person, I am living in the kingdom. I am living right here. Heaven on earth is where I am. And as you preface it with that, then what you can do is the ego will be stepped aside, and you can see and observe and be in each and every moment as it rises, as it falls. As it rises, as it falls. You don't need to label it. You don't need to describe it. You don't need to do anything about it. Just observe it. And what you'll find is that your actions will flow. I have taken the the spiritual characteristic this year, I think I've shared it with you before, mine is freedom. And when I look at what is just going on around me without a critical eye, with the acknowledgement initially, that I am living in the kingdom. And what it gives me is a sense of freedom. That I am free from all sorts of other consternations that could come up for me in this life. Step back and be the observer and see what happens. I was reading, I read every morning a passage from Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan priest. And I found this one this last week that I thought so relates to our topic this morning. I'm going to share it. The supreme art of letting go. What does letting go on the practical level tell you? Letting go is different than denying or repressing. To let go of something is to admit it. You have to own it. Letting go is different than turning it against yourself, different than projecting it onto others. Letting go means that the denied, repressed, rejected parts of yourself, which are nonetheless true, are seen for what they are, but you refuse to turn them against yourself or against others. This is not denial or pretense, but actual transformation. The religious word for this letting go is in some form of forgiveness. You see the imperfect moment for what it is, and you just hand it over to God. You refuse to let any negative storyline or self-serving agenda define your life. This is a very, very different way of living. It implies that you see your mistakes, your shadow side, but you do not identify with either your superiority or your inferiority. Both are equally a problem. Forgiveness is of one piece. Those who give it can also receive it. Those who receive forgiveness can pass it on. You are a conduit, and your only job is not to stop the flow. What comes around will also go around. The art of letting go is really the secret of happiness and freedom. The art of letting go is really the secret of happiness and freedom. One of my prayers that I pray for myself and for others is that I say it every day because it's one of my ones I read when you memorize. I memorized it. That's it. That's the word. I memorized it, and I say it while I'm doing my stretching. And one of the sentences is, "Open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, which constantly comes from within." Open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, which constantly comes from within. And there is a difference between listening to that still small voice and that egoic voice, and to know and be aware of the difference of them. I have been trying to be more aware of that still small voice and acting upon it. How many of you hear it and then you just ignore it? And then you say later, oh man, I knew I should have blah, 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 right? Well, this last week, I'm the treasurer of the Anton Affiliated New Thought Network, and we had a question of a check come in, and I needed to call this person, and I was going by memory thinking I knew who I was calling because, oh yeah, that's the name of her church. And so I called this gal and I said, oh, you said this. She goes, no, that's not me. And I realized, oh, whoops, that's not the right person. I didn't call the right person. But I said out loud, I said, well, there must have been a reason why I called you. And, she told me who I did need to call, which was great. I said, okay, thank you very much. And I hung up the phone. I made the other call. And then I realized, oh my gosh, yes, for sure I've got to call her. I called her back because I said, this last week, I get the mail from the mailbox for Anton, and there was a sizable check in there. And we found out that they are actually giving us the ownership of a second trust deed. And so we will be receiving this nice amount of money every month. And I called and I said, oh my gosh, I'm talking to you. And then I totally forgot about the fact that, you've given us this beautiful gift. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And went on profusely thanking. She and her husband were both there. Put them on speaker. And it was just a great conversation. Everybody ended up crying at the end of it. And it just, it struck me that my voice told me to call her. Though I thought it was for a different reason initially, and when I said out loud, there must have been a reason for me to call you, it helped, dig out the reason why I really did want to speak to her. And so it makes a big difference when we get into that flow of listening, being attentive, and then following through with what that little voice is telling us to do. It makes life rich. It makes life fun. One of the ways that I think that we can surrender, which is important, and it may seem a little strange, but when we have a desire, we're humans. We have desires. We have wants. When we have a desire that comes up, one of the tricks of allowing it to be manifest in our lives is to literally let it go. When we have something just cross through our mind, oh, wouldn't it be nice if? And that literally is planting the seed in the law, and we don't have to worry about it. Our 5-step treatment ends with release, letting it go, putting our intention out there, being grateful, thanking, and then letting it go. That's how life gives us what it wants to give us in life. To me, we are here to live God's life, love's life. And so we need to be available to let its will be done through us. Because its will is always, always for the highest and best good. When you place yourself in that intention of knowing, number one, that I am in the kingdom, God and I are one, there is perfect wholeness here, there is oneness right where I am, then you go into that observer, witness mode and just observe what's going on. And what's happening then, you will be, I believe, in the flow of life. You won't be fighting, you won't be thrashing, you won't be trying to go upstream when everything is going downstream. Because what you're doing is allowing yourself to go with the flow of life. You're not complaining. You're not unhappy about what did or did not happen. Because you ultimately know that this is God's life that is living me. I want to do one of the points that Hawkins brings up in this chapter is the benefits of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a letting go process, right, for ourselves and for others. He says to give up self-pity, to give up anger, to give up resentment, to surrender them through forgiveness. The power of A Course in Miracles is the willingness to forgive all and get out of the lower fields of consciousness. Those lower fields of consciousness, we've talked about them, they're apathy and fear and even pride is on the lower level of your consciousness levels. So I wanted to share with you one of Eileen Katie's readings that if you've got the book at home and you're reading it here, we gave these out last year, everybody. It'll sound familiar because it was just a few days ago. When you are willing to surrender your all to me and hold nothing back, then your every need will be wonderfully met and your life will flow with abundance. For you open the floodgates when you surrender all to me. Absorb this law into your whole being until it becomes part of you and you vibrate with that rhythm of all life and know the meaning of wholeness, of being in tune with the whole of creation and therefore in tune with me. I am the creator of all creation. I am the wholeness of all life. Raise your consciousness and realize that I am within you, that this wholeness is here within you, and that nothing can separate you from the wonder of it except your own limited consciousness. Why not let go and let it expand? Allow nothing to stop that expansion of consciousness until you can accept that I am in you and you are in me and we are one. Earlier in the service, you heard Rita Harrington sing that song, I Surrender. And I wanted to end with singing that today. And if you know it, join me. We can sing it together. I surrender to the power and the presence of God within me. I surrender to the power and the presence of God. I surrender to the power and the presence of God within me. I surrender to the power and the presence of God. Nowhere, no place, no thing can take this love from me. Nowhere, no place, no space where God is not. I surrender to the power and the presence of God within me. I surrender to the power and the presence of God. Give it a try. See how your life works out differently than what your ego is going to plan. It'll be better. Namaste. Love you.